So I have no idea who this girl is. She just chanced upon my feed, but she did this awesome interview that does such a good job in explaining everything that's happening in America with the Islamization. And as you all know, that's one of my favorite topics to talk about. But this is so good. I also don't know who she's interviewing. So if you're familiar with these people, please hit me in the comment section below so that I can thank them publicly and review their content more, because clearly they're on our side and we always love somebody who can think a little logically. Let's dive right in. I don't have much else to say. This is going to be very interesting.
When you see large concentrations of Muslim communities in Minneapolis and Dearborn and many other places in this country, we see we call it the Islamification of these places, and I think it's pretty obvious. You see a lot of the community completely changing. You see the call to prayer. You see a lot of bars closing down. You see just the entire infrastructure change, and it's to accommodate a group of people who are of Muslim descent, and they live the way they live in their home countries, and they bring it here, and they don't change at all. They don't assimilate. They don't want to. Is it possible for large concentrations of people from Somalia or from any of these Islamic nations? Is it possible for them to assimilate? Do they have any desire to do it? Is it possible to have just large concentrations of Muslim communities in the U.S.?
No, only if they completely reject Islam and Islam Sharia and do something else as a lifestyle. But no, it's not. I mean, the first war America fought after the revolution was against Muslims in Tripoli. And Thomas Jefferson sent the Marines in there to attack the potentate. And this was after John Adams and Thomas Jefferson met with the potentate from Tripoli, who said, in answer to their question, why are you seizing American ships and kidnapping Americans on the high seas? And he said, because that's the command of Allah. That's what our Quran commands. Muslims and Somalians in Minnesota or in Tennessee or in Columbus, Ohio, are doing what Islam commands, just like the Afghan refugees that are waging jihad in the United States now, or any of these national Muslim organizations. I saw the governor of New York put out a tweet, and is named January 2026 is, Muslim American Heritage Month, and they're shining green lights on the major buildings in New York City, talking about the great, achievements of Muslims. And so I asked on social media, can you name one Islamic organization in the state of New York that's not a jihadi organization, that's not hostile? And I'll give her a hint, and I'll give your viewers a hint. The answer is there are none.
I think what a great answer. What a great non-apologetic answer, right? What he's saying is what we all know to be true. Look, if you're a Muslim who actually kind of rejects the basis of Quran, like you're a modernized Muslim, then fine, we can live with you. But if you believe in the speakings and the callings of this book, then at the end of the day, what you believe in is something that is anti-American. And by the way, look around. What they're trying to do is the word of the Quran, meaning it's not like they're doing stuff that's very different and we don't have proven evidence. No, they're actually trying to take over and dominate locations in America with very anti-American ideals. This is what's interesting, is that people think, oh, if you don't like the Islamist takeover, then it means that you don't believe that any people should have religious freedoms to kind of showcase their religion with pride. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think Jews and Buddhists and Hindus, and there are so many different types of people that should be allowed to showcase if they believe in showcasing it, but not in dominating and taking over. The problem is that this specific religion that these people are following, that is the entire belief system, which is why they're doing it now in the States, which is why you can't really allow for such a thing. Sorry.
And that's the problem. Islam is inherently hostile to liberty, to the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah.
And for those who want to disagree, I would just say, name one book of Islamic law that's ever been published authoritatively, or one textbook used in U.S. Islamic schools to teach 10-year-old Muslim children about Islam that doesn't say the purpose of Islam is to wage war against non-Muslims to establish an Islamic state under Allah's divine law, Sharia. That's the question. So if you want to be offended or be hurt, honestly, tough crap. You've got to deal with the fact that that's what Islam is. And just because you know people that self-identify as Muslims that tell you they don't want to do that, well, first of all, Sharia obliges them to lie to you. But even if they're being sincere, their personal opinion does not constitute a different version of what Islam is. And since Islam is conquering U.S. towns and cities and has conquered places across the United States and countries in Europe, it's time to pull your head out of your ass and actually engage in the war. And sadly, the current U.S. administration is not only not doing it, they're taking actions to advance the U.S. Islamic movement. No governor in the United States is doing anything to actually put their finger on the enemy and vanquish the enemy, because that's how wars are won. Wars are not won by changing policies and fixing issues.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about Mamdani. I'm sure you have some thoughts on him. He's the mayor of New York City. He's supposed to be working on New York City, right? That's his job. He seems much more concerned with international law, which is interesting to me. He felt he should be briefed on the Maduro capture. I think he's punching way above his weight class there. But when you look at him and you look at what he's trying to implement, I think you see a little bit of, Islamic motivation. But then you also see this Marxist, communist, socialist thing too, the seizing the means of production and everything, rent should be free, and we're going to have government-owned grocery stores and all the things that he's talked about pretty openly that he wants to bring not only to the city of New York, but also to the country. When you see that, what are some of the things that he's saying that should be alarm bells to people that, maybe make them uneasy, but they don't understand the extent of what he wants to bring?
Well, first of all, he's a jihadi, so that should set alarm bells off. When he says things like we've got to flush away rugged individualism, and I think he said the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism. That's talk of Stalin and Mao and Lenin. Those are lifted right out of Communist Manifesto. So he's making it clear who he is, and the federal government has a constitutional duty to ensure all Americans live under a Republican form of government. And that's not only what's coming out of his mouth, those are not the policies he is immediately already implementing. And therefore, the president has a duty to take action. And I think Americans, because in my experience over the last 20 plus years going around the country and briefing national leaders, state leaders, and local leaders and citizens, and when we talk about the law and government as it relates to the founding principles, I've found that most people that identify themselves as patriots do not understand some of the most basic tenets of the U.S. Federalist system. They don't understand the ideals in the Declaration. They don't understand what the founding principles are. And so they certainly do not understand that the president has a duty to remove these people from power. Now, this is a massive constitutional issue, but Americans have the constitutional privilege and right to live in a Republican form of government. And in places like Minnesota and in places like New York City, they're living under something other than that, either a jihadist communist system or a communist system in many U.S. cities. And so something has to be done. I would argue, I would not hold your breath and wait for the federal or state government to do something. I mean, the reason why I spend most of my time training local communities is because the best way for these changes to get, for action to be taken is for citizens to do it. Citizens will win the war or we will lose in the United States. But if you're holding your breath, waiting for Mr. Trump or your governor to do something, you're going to pass out and probably die of lack of oxygen.
You know what, in terms of what's realistic, right? Like, it sounds great. We're going to remove Mamdani. Yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily possible. I understand what you're saying. I understand that what goes against our constitutional norms and all these things, and I don't disagree, but you can't just remove the mayor. So in what way? I mean, if he does something, obviously he's got a city council, and a lot of the things that he wants to do, he would need the governor to do anyway. I don't know how willing she's going to be to do a lot of those things, raising the taxes and what have you. But in terms of, realistic ways that could actually be implemented to stop some of the things that Mamdani wants to do, or at least to point out what they are and why they go against our Constitution, what are some realistic steps that can be taken, even if it's just from an educational standpoint? Because I think a lot of people, they hear him say things about affordability and they think, okay, yes, New York is unaffordable, we need to make it more affordable, and it doesn't feel controversial when he says rent freeze or city run grocery stores. To them, they don't understand why that's a problem.
I like this because I think a lot of times I'd never heard the idea that Constitution, that you could be able to remove somebody like this, and I'm interested to learn more about it. I think one of the mistakes we make, and he refers to this, is that we listen to information and we feel like because we have a gut reaction, we know a lot about it, but we don't. At the beginning, when he talks about the fact, like, just read the books, that they're teaching these kids. Most people haven't even read the Quran, but they know that they don't like Islamization. So it's an interesting kind of conflation here of things, but I'm interested to understand. And I like the fact that she's bringing this back and say, okay, so what can we do? Because I think a lot of you guys have been saying to me, okay, what can we do?
Yeah, so a national, it's something we advocated 15, 16 years ago, or actually almost 18 years ago, is there has to be a national education campaign at a massive level to educate Americans about what the actual founding principles are and how the U.S. government is supposed to work, because we are very far from that. And then the contrast of where we are versus what was established with the not only with the writing and the signing of the Declaration as the ideal, but the Constitution as the next great attempt to do that, to implement that. But we all, from a strategic perspective, number one, Americans have to understand we're in a war. And it's not a pretend war or that's not hyperbole. We're in a real war. Hostile foreign powers waging war against the United States, primarily using counterintelligence, espionage, subversion, but also real war, like real violence by communist groups like BLM and Antifa, by groups like Communist Party USA, Democratic Socialist, Code Pink, Green Party, Rise and Resist, Socialist Workers Party, all these things. The jihadi organizations, Islamic Society in North America, U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, CARE, ISNA, ICNA, MAS, Muslim Student Association, MGAGE, Students for Justice in Palestine, and the list goes on. These are the proxies for the hostile foreign powers.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Yes, it is a war. That's it. It's simple. It's easy to understand. And everything makes so much more sense when you stop seeing this as something just like that's happening, but rather like a proper attack on your belief systems that needs to be dealt with as such.
But from a U.S. strategic perspective, the strategy that we have put forth across the United States, if states want to implement them, I wouldn't focus on places like New York, Minneapolis, some of the tougher areas like Houston. You go to counties and you educate, and the term I use and the term my team uses is you fortify them. You educate them in the founding principles. You educate them on the threat. You show them how to fortify your county, how to flush any communist or jihadi entity or leader out lawfully and constitutionally, and how to keep them from coming into your county. And we've had success across the United States. We just have to scale it to a much larger degree. But in places like Hennepin County, which is Minneapolis, you can't go in there. That's going to either be taken by military force, or the strategy is you work in the counties around that hostile county, like around the counties that encompass places like Hamtramck or Dearborn, and you work in the outskirts where patriots reside. You don't go into, the belly of the beast. If you wake up one day and find yourself on if I can use an older example, or a Chinese military base, you don't try to fight your way out. You exfil out, and then you work to build forces outside of that and come back in and take it. That's what I would encourage. I think with Mamdani, again, I understand your hesitation, and I understand what I'm saying is foreign to a lot of Americans, because I don't think when you understand the constitutional powers of the executive, you can go in and remove people from power. It's just there are going to be constitutional scholars that are going to fight about how that's possible and what needs to happen. But I just don't think the discussion actually needs to be had. I think the large parts of America where we have patriots who want to support America, which is the majority, even though the way it's portrayed in the media is we're the minority. You fortify your counties. That's why I developed the into action training, and you establish big swaths of each state that are fortified, and then you go and take the parts of your state that aren't. And that's the way this war is playing out. It's fracturing America, and we're going to have to unify the parts that are filled with patriots before we can go after the bad guys that are here.
This is absolutely amazing, and I think this is going to be very relieving for a lot of the people that are here and watching this. The problem with our obsession and focus with Mamdani and guilty as charged, totally obsessed, is that you're not thinking about, when I say you, I mean we're not thinking about the fact that what we're seeing at Mamdani is probably going to be replicated. Now, we've said it as an alarm bell, right? Like, oh, it's going to happen everywhere. But it hasn't yet happened. Once something's happened, it's much more complicated to undo. But before it's happened, there are things that can be done to stop it. And so, therefore, if you live in anywhere that isn't like New York City or isn't Dearborn, Michigan, this is something that you should be thinking about. How do I get educated, and how do I ensure that my location stays safe? Because if we can create many, many, many small locations that aren't going to allow for jihadi takeovers, we can stop this kind of attempt of theirs to just metastasize and grow everywhere, which is their plan, right? They took over New York City, which is a problem. But the hyper focus and the trying to kind of attack directly, not going to work. I can do a million videos about how ridiculous Mamdani is, and it's not going to remove him from power. He is in power. But we can talk to people in other locations and stop them from allowing potential Mamdanis to even get near positions of power by being more responsible for, I don't know, individual involvement in community and getting on boards of certain things. People who see the threat of Islamization can figure out how to ensure that other people who are against that don't come into power. Interesting food for thought, my friends. Thank you for your attention to this matter.